All the roads are winding.
Welcome back to the show, Asha. I'm really excited to connect again, and thanks so much for coming back and being our guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Would you like to begin our conversation with an invocation or setting the tone?
Sure, I'd love that. So I'll just invite everyone to get comfortable. And as much as you can, bring yourself present to this moment. Bring yourself present to the month that we're in, the year that we're in. Just knowing that as your feet are planted on the ground, that the earth is beneath you. Akikwe. The Earth Mother is holding you and steadying you. And perhaps bring your energy down to meet her energy. Today, that earth energy rises up to meet you, warming the soles of your feet and just moving through the wholeness and the fullness of your body. You may experience it as a tingling or a warmth or love. As you breathe it through, it weaves into all of your bones and your memories and your blood. It weaves through the ancient knowing that you carry. It weaves through your own unique medicine. Your ancestors, your animal spirit guides, your connection to your spiritual support team. This energy activates. This energy catalyzes and initiates all of your connection to the spirit world and beyond. And as you breathe, just feel that Mother Earth heartbeat that is beneath your feet, illuminating your own heartbeat, reminding you that you have an inner drumbeat, reminding you that this drumbeat connects you to all of creation, reminding you that you are one in this moment, that you are Earth, that you are creation, and that you are the medicine. And you can slowly open your eyes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We've had you on the show before, but I would love to just ask you the same questions in case someone's not familiar with you and let them know they can go back and listen to your other episode as well. But who are your ancestral lineages?
So my ancestors are Anishinaabe. They are from different First Nations all across Ontario, what is now known as Ontario on Turtle Island. That's who they are.
Awesome. And where do you live now, and who are the people of that land?
So I am on the lands of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. And we're still here. So that's what I always like to remember, that we're still here, even though the spirit of the land is also holding a lot of wisdom that I like to acknowledge every day as I acknowledge where I'm situated right now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so I'm excited to get into what you've been getting into lately, which is animal medicine. And you've written a book that's coming out soon. So do you want to share with us, what is that book and what are you getting into in the book? Just kind of a general overview.
Yes. So my book is called You Are the Medicine, and it outlines sort of the 13 Anishinaabe moons. And there's a teaching to every moon. You know, that teaching was based on where we were situated on the land. So, folks kind of tend to lump all Indigenous people together, and we're not a monolith. And every First Nation has their own connection to different aspects of the land or ceremony or ritual, different animals that we coexisted with, different plant medicines and foods, different ways of living. So this is really specific to my lineage and being here in Southern Ontario, and then beyond, that's sort of where my ancestors are. The 13 moons are based on what was happening during that time. The bears were hibernating, or the strawberries were blooming, or the flowers were coming to life. So they really are based on traditionally where my people come from. And then each moon, each chapter is a moon, and it has an animal spirit teaching and medicine and integration that weaves through some storytelling. But ultimately, what I would love every reader to remember is that they have this within them, so that they can connect to my words or my teachings as a way into their own knowing, their own ancestral connection, and their own wisdom, because I believe that we all have that. And, colonial oppressive systems or white supremacy or the patriarchy. It's all suppressed all of that from us. So this is a reconnection to spirit, a reconnection to your own connection.
Beautiful. And, who doesn't love animals and working with the medicine of animals? And, what are you getting into? Like, what is animal spirit medicine to you? And I know, like, the term, we're using here the term animal spirit. Well, how is that different from spirit animal? And, like, how are non-Indigenous folks able to respectfully engage with these teachings and this work from your lineages? Like, I think that people kind of probably have some hesitations about appropriation, and I'd love to just hear your perspective.
Yes, I love this question. And I love to speak about it as, I know people use spirit animal, animal totem, animal spirit, and I use all those terms too, but I really love to think of it as medicine, which is something that helps you come closer to yourself or to healing or to remembering who you are. So I've taught thousands of non-Indigenous folks about animal spirit medicine, and lots of Indigenous people will say that non-Indigenous people don't have spirit animal medicine. They're like, there's no possibility. It's only for Indigenous people. That hasn't been my experience in working with all of these people. So for me, I need to go on that. And I see animals around people who are not Indigenous that become medicine for them. So for me, it's something that helps you remember who you are. It helps you to return to perhaps something that you've forgotten about yourself. It helps you, with protection or guardianship. It can unlock something that is maybe part of your shadow that's wanting to come into the light. So I think there's a variety of ways sort of to use that. And for non-Indigenous folks, I just ask that there's a reverence when you're taking these teachings in and you're using them in your life. I'm not the police of that. I can't know how you're going to use that, right? That's just not my purpose here on this earth. For some people it is. All I know is that this is about connection and to treat them as a relationship as sacred as you would treat your children or your best friend or, your kin in all ways. That's how I present it. And then not to use it in a joking manner. Like I think that by saying, my BFF is my spirit animal or my child's my spirit animal or coffee is my spirit animal, it sort of reduces it to a meme or a joke. And that is not respectful, as we know. So I think that most people know that. And I think that's the way to use it in a way that will honor our lineage and our culture and our teachings.
I'd love to get into animals that are personal to you. Like how have animals guided you and offered their medicine in your own life?
So I have walked with a few my whole life. People ask me, do you have the same animals your whole life? And I think that deer medicine has been one of the medicines that keeps coming back to me to look at. The compassion and self-care. I was diagnosed with lupus when I was 17, and it put me on this spiritual journey. And it always comes back to, can you soften? Can you release the hardness that you have against yourself, your inner critic, your harshness, your perfectionist, like all of those qualities. Lupus in my body has taught me that I need to listen and slow down and be kind to myself. So deer is that animal that kind of I felt like come in with me through my mother's womb space and been with me as that lesson that will weave in and out throughout my life. And then I have bear that comes with me a lot. These are the animals of my medicine wheel. So they tend to be around my space a lot for boundaries, for saying no to things, for using my sacred voice and standing my ground. That's a big teaching from bear for me. And then during the seasons and cycles of hibernation, I tend to be one who has a hard time to slow down and stop until my body tells me I have to. So bear is with me a lot. And then eagle is sort of that visionary medicine that comes to help me do journeying and seeing and dreaming. I dream ever since I was a child. I've dreamt so much every night, and they're so crystal clear and prophetic. So eagle comes to help me with that, which is really powerful. And then different animals come in and out of my life. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was dreaming about orcas, and orcas will come when I'm about to like step into something really huge. And it's just saying like, can you step into the medicine of this vastness? And can you be bigger? You know, can you leap into joy, into this new aspect of your medicine? So it's almost like themes, you know, I'll be going through something in my life and then they'll come in my dreams. Hawk feathers do the same thing. I have moose sometimes. I have snakes sometimes. So they pop in and out as like this little reminder. Oh, you've forgotten something about yourself, or we're here to give you a little bit of an extra boost in your daily life that you can use. So that's sort of how they're with me all the time. And I call them in ceremony all the time. And I really feel like they are like my truest allies.
I hear you speaking about them of coming in your dreams, and I'm wondering, how else have you known that these were your animal companions? Were they showing up physically? Were they like symbols? Like, how did this recognition begin? Because I imagine people are like, is this animal really talking to me or not?
Right. So I really love journeying. Like, I think journeying is like the most, you know, I have some shamanic background. I've done some training in that realm. And
for someone who maybe doesn't know what journeying is, can you just describe it real quick?
Of course. So, you know, it's getting into a space where you're connecting to different realms that just aren't in that sort of earthly kind of realm that we're in right now. So this could be, you may be visualizing something, and usually it's guided. You can do it by drumming too, and just listen to a drum and just see where you go. But I like guided journeys because I think it just helps to guide the listener into just a way of seeing or feeling or experiencing. And that tends to be how I work with my communities and all the people that I've worked with. So a journey to me always opens up that portal of that animal, and that space for that animal to come forward that is going to be helpful for you. So I'd say, like, say so for bear, I would do a couple journeys and bear would always show up in my journeys. Now, of course, you can also see animals just running past your path. Like, that's, you know, people, I saw 2 deer today. I'm going to look up deer medicine, or an eagle was flying over my head. That's a way that's very easy to interpret and see. Sometimes it's just like, oh my goodness, why do I keep seeing that same picture of that polar bear? Like, it might just be, why do my children want all these stuffies of the same animal, you know? So there might be messages just that you need to be open to that are synchronistic, that animals can come in but for me, it's been mostly like journeying and dreams. And also sometimes just a knowing, like sometimes I'll hear a growl of a wolf, and I just know that it's there, and I'm just like, who's there? And I'll ask. So I think it's a lot of questions too, just being curious and open. Also seeing other practitioners, you know, I do a lot of healing work for myself because I'm constantly just working on that evolution and my shadow. So that uncovers a ton for me to work with an actual practitioner or a mentor. Then the animals tend to show up there too.
Thank you. And then when, you know, you speak so clearly about how you know what bear is speaking to you, how bear is speaking to you, what it represents, is that just through, you know, did you read a book and you're like, that's what bear means? Or were you like, this is what the themes are showing up in my life? You know, how did those meanings congeal there?
Yeah, I think like, just as we would do, you know, as Ojibwe people, we would see how bear would act in the world. We'd watch them. We'd even listen to how the sounds they made. Like the word for bear in Ojibwe is makwa. And that was the sound that you'd hear bear speak. So that's what Ojibwe, that's the words of what we call our animals, like the sounds we'd hear, the actions, we'd see them moving around. So a lot of the animals that work with me, I sort of looked at how they show up in the world. And what they represented. But yes, I think that really speaks to something important, because I do think you could read the book, you could Google it, you could see what resonates, but it has to speak to that inner wisdom. It has to speak to that knowing. I think those are really good like gateways in, but then once you've got that, like, oh, this is a suggestion for bear, this is a suggestion for deer, just running it past your own intuition and thinking, oh yeah, that really speaks to me. And when I see it next time, that's what it means for me.
I love that. And I imagine, like, in your book, you probably talk about how people can interpret that or deepen that connection. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. And again, I think it goes back to that reciprocal relationship. something that I see in our new age spaces is, people are offering like free card readings or whatever. And somebody gets, I want one. And then the next day somebody's offering more card readings and then they go to get the next one. And there's not a lot of space for integration or that relationship building. So if an animal is coming to you and you're feeling like this is the spirit animal that wants to work with me right now, can you build a little altar for it? Can you put some medicine down for it every day? Can you do a prayer or an invocation for it when you're moving into sacred space with it? Like those are the types of things, even like building a little vision board and putting it on there. I think having it around you all the time is just like, it's good for you to build that relationship with spirit constantly. And then all of a sudden it'll become second nature. And then they start to show up, I think, as I know now if I'm feeling some sort of energy coming towards me that I'm not wanting, I will feel a wolf coming and growling and baring its teeth because it's very potent, because that's the relationship I have with it, right? So they become my guardians. And I know, okay, something that, jealousy, envy, judgment, something that's projection, that's not mine, is needing to be cleared. So it just gives me a warning. I do have warnings from these animals, and that's really important for me too.
I love that. As you're talking, I'm just like coming to mind a recent animal encounter for myself and relationship, which I'm almost 38 and it took me all these years to like recognize, but my whole life I've been so connected to rabbits. And I did not realize this until December 2021. And I had just this experience. And then it just like, it's in the span of, a month and a half, it's changed my life. Like they've taught me so much just from tuning in. And I went to volunteer with rescue rabbits and like be with them and like, animals are so amazing and they have such power to enrich our lives. And, just hearing you speak and I'm getting like, it gets me so excited. I get so excited about it. And, so, you also talk about the 13 moons, and I love this. 13 is that forbidden feminine number that's been so othered and so just like made to be bad. And it's, in that process of colonization and of domination and of suppressing the feminine and of suppressing nature. So I'd love to hear a little bit about why 13 moons, and just tell us more about that. Just tell us more about from your own background in language and words. And also I love hearing your indigenous, your like the different languages and words. So if you want to share more words from indigenous languages, I think that'd be beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, that's a bit challenging. We could talk about that, why that is. But the 13 moons, there are 13 cycles of the moon every year. It just doesn't always happen as 13 full moons. So the actual calendar is based on that lunar calendar, not the Gregorian calendar. So there are 13 moon names. Now, not every year they fall, sometimes you have an extra moon in July and August, sometimes in October. So it just depends on the year that you're going into. But the cycles, there are 13 cycles. So I wanted to put it in, with that divine feminine. Plus it's our teachings that there are the 13 moons and they are on the back of a turtle shell. So if you look at the back of a turtle shell, you have 13 of those like markings in the middle of the turtle shell. And on the outside, you have the days that you're counting around. So we used to use that to know when the next full moon was coming. So the calendar is actually on the turtle shell, and that's where the 13 is representing, our calendar. So it's a little bit, it's interesting because everybody's like, well, I know the Gregorian calendar, there's only 12 months of the year, right? So it has, what you say is so beautiful about all of that that's been like suppressed. That really is connecting us back to the earth and the cycles and all of nature. So I love that you added that in.
Yeah, I mean that 13, reclaim the 13. Cool. So, you are the medicine. This is such, I think a lot of people kind of like get this in a way, but they're also like, but then why do we need each other? Like you are the medicine, and why I want to get a little bit more into what led you here to you are the medicine, versus this guru is the medicine or this pill is the medicine or whatever. And like, just take us there.
Yeah, so that's I was thinking about this the other day of where that sort of came from, and it really came from my journey of being diagnosed. Like I remember being sitting in front of doctors when I was 17, and the rheumatologist are saying like, you need to go on steroids the rest of your life. You need to go on anti-malarial drugs, and this is, you're never going to have children, and you're going to be this unhealthy the rest of your life. And at 17, I was terrified. Like I didn't have a ton of internal, like, oh my gosh, I'm the medicine. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I'm never going to have kids. So I was really freaked out. But it sent me on this journey, and this journey of reclaiming, because at the time, my grandparents were in residential school. They were very highly colonized, very highly oppressed in that way. So I wasn't connected to a lot of my medicines. My mother raised us with beautiful values, Indigenous values, but it still wasn't like, we grew up Catholic, we went to school and church and all the things. And so I was really distant from those things. When I got sick, I used to see my ancestors at night from when I was a little girl, and I used to be such a dreamer and a visionary and sensitive and a healer. But all that stuff just was like, oh, that's just like over here. I don't even know what that's about. So then when I got sick, it cracked me open really deeply. And in those moments, I think I just knew there had to be a different way. So I went to see like a naturopath, and then I found homeopathy, and homeopathy was like magical to me. There are these little pellets that somehow helped my emotional state. And I thought, oh, my emotions must have something to do with my physical illness. So it just started unweaving into this like wisdom of like, my goodness, I'm more than just the sum of my parts. I'm more than just a body. I'm a spirit. I'm a mind. I'm an emotional being. I'm a heart. And then I went to homeopathy school after university, and that was where I was like, oh my goodness, yes, everything makes sense now. Like it was energy medicine. It was energetic medicine that was gentle, yet enormously effective. I used it for my own self, like when I couldn't walk or my arthritis was so bad, or like just healing me from so many ailments that I just knew I have to share this with the world. So really that's like the core of You Are the Medicine, because it was like, all you need is a catalyst. If you're open, and I don't want to say like so flippantly, like all you need, because there's so many variables of healing. And it's not just a magic pill. Like I've done so much other work too, but really it kind of initiated this, like, you can remember, your body can remember. You just have to meet that energy. So it came from like my knowing of homeopathy and working as a homeopath for 15 years, seeing like the light of somebody's eyes return, seeing their vital force respond to something, seeing children, because they're so pure. And so like, they just have none of the wounding that we carry as much. So just seeing how beautifully it worked in there, I just thought our vital force is like a pulse that pulses through all of us. When does it get lost? When does it get shut down? When does it get suppressed? How can we return to that? And to me, it's not this whole, like, I know right now the conversation is like, we need to be caring about people. And You Are the Medicine doesn't mean like you're just in your own being, not caring. It's like, you are the medicine, and then we're sitting in circle. We're in community. If you are engaged with your own medicine, and that person is too, imagine what we could create in circle and then in the world. Like, imagine we had that. Our vital force was like healthy and bright and shining. We could create a whole new world, I feel. We could heal the world. So that's where that comes from. And again, it's just one viewpoint from one Indigenous person, but I do feel like it's a place that maybe we could return to.
Yeah, and I hear you speaking to, our bodies are nature, and they're so wise. And if we can just help those cycles stop being interrupted, this homeopathic medicine helps, and just the spirit medicine helps. And how do we, of course, physical medicine, certain types of medicine will help us to let those cycles do what they do. Let our body's wisdom do stop interrupting it, Feed it what it needs. Support the emotions.
Yeah. And I know there's so much there's so many issues around access and around, really about access and just like who's getting this support and who's not. And I think that's a huge systemic issue right now. So, that's part of my mission too, right? It's just like, as I share this with the world, I want more access for Indigenous people to even clean water. That is like so vital, right? And like foods that are going to be nourishing for our bodies, and medicines that are going to be nourishing for our bodies. There's nothing wrong with the medical system. There's nothing wrong. Like, I'm never demonizing that, but I just know, like, if we could return to some of these ways, our ancestral ways, our knowing, I feel like health would be a byproduct of that. So, but I do acknowledge that there's huge systemic change that is needed, and a huge, there's no equity in health and wellness, especially in the New Age and wellness community.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how your own healing, someone's personal healing, you've kind of touched on this already, but the personal healing connects out to the communal healing, and how working with animal spirit medicine can help us with facing this system, because I think it can get convoluted in people's minds of like, okay, I have to like be out there doing this, but I have to like do my inner work and and like, and then people get immobilized and don't do anything. And so how do these pieces kind of fit together within the bigger picture of creating this beautiful world that we would all like to see and live in?
I think it comes back to capacity. And this is something I think about a lot, because it's something that I noticed when like Black Lives Matter came up, and then, and then COVID. So it was like such an interesting intersection of like overwhelm and burnout, I think. So we all tried to, well, not we all, but like some of us tried to do all the things, right? And like march and protest and donate and do all the things. And then we just ran out of capacity after 2 years after, the pandemic's hitting us. And this is a question I get all the time. Like, I understand what you're saying and I hear you, but I have my own crap to deal with, right, in my life, and my own kids and stuff. And I think the more, if we did have some access to some healing for like our nervous systems, or just to have a little bit more capacity to care about the other humans and our kin in this world, like, I think that would be so amazing. And I wish I had an answer, like a magic wand to say like, every you get capacity, right? Because like we all have just different lives in that way. But it's almost, I feel so basic to just be like, just do a little bit of nervous system shaking every day, and a little bit of screaming in the forest if you can. And like, ask yourself what collective energy you're holding and how you can move that out of your body. I think right now, as sensitive beings, we're sucking in so much collective, personal, then there's ancestral and familial that we don't even know we're carrying. So how can you be mindful of that? And then as you shake that off, you're going to have a little more space to care. I know that sounds basic, but I think it's true. You're going to have a little more space to care and then take action.
I'm just over here nodding my head because I'm like, yes, it's like this inner spaciousness matters, because that gives us that outer spaciousness, and everything you're saying, I'm like, yes. I love it. Okay, earlier I kind of hinted at, speaking about Indigenous language, and there seems like there's a bigger story there. Do you want to get into that?
Yeah. So, it's sort of sad. It makes me sad because my grandparents were in residential school, and my grandfather spoke Ojibwe fluently. I don't think he could even speak English when he went to residential school. And then, of course, those languages got beaten out of Indigenous people, right? So beaten, shamed, horrible things happened to Indigenous children in those places. A lot of them died, right? So it's horrific things happened. But the saddest thing, I mean, for my generation is that language got erased, because once they were shamed into not speaking it, and then it wasn't the right way, of course, they got the colonial mindset of like, this is the right way. This is the way you're going to be able to integrate into normal society, right? We're trying to wipe the Indian out of the child completely, which means wiping the language out. And then, of course, my grandfather ends up not speaking that language in his home with his children, with my mother. And then to reclaim a language that's been lost in that way is very challenging. It's a really hard language to learn. I've taken 2 university courses of it. I do not know to speak it fluently in any way. I can say some words, but it's very challenging. Plus, there's like a ton of generational trauma that blocks you, because it's like, I don't know this. I don't know how to. I'm going to try. It's too even scary to try sometimes, because that generational trauma is in your bones. So writing this book, I wanted to speak about that story, but also have some of the language in there as respect. And it's also challenging. And I didn't realize how challenging it was until I had to read the audiobook. And as I read the audiobook out loud, each of the chapter has the moon in Anishinaabe. Now, there are many different dialects. There are many different ways some of these words are spelled or even spoken. So when I was writing it, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to use this one way that I'm seeing it written. But then I see it written somewhere else and think, did I do it wrong? Did I do it the wrong way? Is somebody going to call me out and say, that's not right, even though this is where I'm getting it from? And I was like, okay, I have to do like the, reference of where I got this from too. And we are an oral tradition. So we speak, that's how we learn. That's how we shared stories orally. There's not a lot of writing down. So to put everything in written words sometimes is really challenging. And then when I had to read the audiobook, I had to stop and listen to the Ojibwe language dictionary, which is not my dialect. The only one online is not my dialect. I don't have anybody to ask. So I have to try to listen to it to say it properly. And again, all that trauma rises up thinking, what if somebody says this is wrong? What if this is not the right way? And all I can do is try and acknowledge that there's a reason because of that this is the way it is and it's not my fault. But it's really hard. So that's in my book. That's in my book. You'll see it. And you'll also hopefully feel my intention of trying to just put those words in there because it's part of my healing, but it's not perfect.
That sounds like it's really challenging, yes, as you said, it's in your bones, and there's so many layers. It's not just saying a word. It's so much behind that. How have you been moving through that? Like, as it sounds like writing this book was an experience for like a portal for you too. And in that, the way that lives in your nervous system, the way it lives in your bones, have you also found some healing in that, or is it still like a really sticky place for you if you're willing to go there?
Of course. I've found a lot of healing. I think it was interesting. I noticed, people had talk about like writer's block. And I didn't get blocked until I got to the chapter where I had to write about residential school trauma. And I had done a healing with this amazing medicine healer. And she says, there are forces out there that don't want you to write these words. There are forces trying to shut you down to writing this truth. And that sent chills in my bones down my spine because I could feel it. It was literally like my vision was being shut down. My voice was being shut down. I could feel it. And it's just that colonial white supremacist energy that was trying to shut me down. So this is a book of, I don't know, magnificent proportion of this is the magnitudes of the energy it took for my ancestors even to help me move forward was huge. And then moving through after the audio happened, there was some trauma that happened after I read that, which was really deep colonial trauma that rose up. So I think I've just been bringing it to my therapist, bringing it to my healers, doing lots of shaking and nervous work, doing lots of I think a lot of self-care too as I launch it into the world, because I think it can be very vulnerable. And then there's all these different, it can be vulnerable for anybody, but then these different layers are adding to that. So I'm asking for a ton of ancestral support, but it's the last, I guess it's been a year and a half of sort of writing and getting it out in the world. It's been a big journey. And of course, it's always healing for me. I'm so grateful of the healing, but it's cracked open layers that I probably wouldn't have imagined when I got that book deal. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a book.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, giving us a peek inside. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about this book writing process too. How did the book come to you? Was it I want to be birthed and you went and proposed it? Or was someone hey, the publisher was hey, you should write a book? And then tell us a little bit more about your book writing process and some of those practices of calling upon your ancestors and how did you move through this in your spiritual support team, I guess, and practices?
So I got the book deal as part of they had a diverse wisdom contest Hay House did. So I had to write an essay. So I wrote an essay, and then there was 160 people who had competed for this essay. And then they were choosing 15 people. So I got to go down to Houston and go to their writer's workshop and got to experience that for the weekend. And then you had to write a proposal. And I'd never done a proposal before. So I thought, I really want to do this. I was so dedicated because I just felt I know that I'm meant to have a book in the world, and I've always actually wanted to be a Hay House author. It was like my dream since I was 20. So I had that vision forever. And I thought, well, this could be a really good way to get there, right? But there was like a lot of people. I was in the Diverse Wisdom, there was 16 folks that I was like sort of competing against. But I got home and I literally like started the next day. I was like, I am serious about this. So I wrote the proposal for 6 months. And in that, I knew that I wanted sort of my stories to be in there. I knew I wanted some of my life stories, and I also wanted some of that animal medicine. So I thought, what would be the best framework to put that in, you know? So I had to have some sort of way to put it into context, I guess, because it wasn't going to be a novel. I needed to have some sort of like, this is what you do next, you know? So it had to flow. So that's what I proposed, and I wrote it and I sent it in. And then the day before my birthday, 2020, the day before my birthday, they called me, like Reed Tracy from Hay House called me, and I was on a walk and I missed the call. And then I went back and I'm like, California. Then I listened to the message and they're like, you won, and you're going to be published by Hay House and you're going to have this book deal. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I was really almost shocked, but excited. Yeah. So I remember that moment. And then I think I paused for a little bit. I needed to know what I had to do and like how to start. And I remember somebody saying at that writer's workshop, you're going to be in a place where you're just like, I have to find that right candle and have the right music playing. And I'm like, I won't be like that. But then I noticed myself like trying to find the right candle. And I burned probably like 30 candles in the process of writing my book. But the most challenging part was that the pandemic happened and my children were home. My little one at the time was only 2. So they had shut down daycare, they shut down schools, and they were just running wild around me as I was writing. So I feel a little bit of grief around that because I didn't get that like romantic go into a coffee shop and writing, or even going away because we've been in lockdown for so long in Ontario. So that's been kind of challenging. Like if I ever get, when I get another book deal, I would love to have a different experience of writing, because this one was really hard on my nervous system. And I'd love a little bit more space, as we talked about spaciousness, to do that next time.
Yeah, I've heard, I have a bunch of friends who have published books now, and like, it sounds like such an intense process. You're really like pulling things up and out and moving through it, and doing it in a pandemic with your tiny bit, like still a baby. That's a lot. That's a lot.
It was a lot. And now I have an Oracle deck coming out with Hay House next year too. So that was one thing. At the time, I said yes to it before the pandemic really started. So it was like, oh, sure, I can do 2 books in like 2 years. And then when it came down to it, I was like, oh my goodness, I said yes to these 2 projects that were just like so huge back to back. I finally have my first draft in for that. So I'm grateful. I feel like I could breathe now, but that was intense. Like whatever is to come now, I know I can do it. I'm like, I built the resilience.
Wow, that's amazing. And like moving through this process, did you have any, you were finding the right candle and the right music, which is so funny. I was laughing there. But did you have like an altar for your book? And, in working with your ancestors, are you just like, yo, ancestors, help me? Or are you like making offerings and ceremonies? Like how did you tend that channel? I mean, I imagine you tend it every day, but like, was it different in writing a book?
It was. I did have an altar at different stages. So I had an altar for my proposal. Then I changed it up when I sort of got the book deal, and made it different, because I didn't even know what the book was going to look like. I was just sort of like, this is the essence I'd like the cover to kind of be and hold. So I had that for a while. And now I actually have one I'm sitting next to it now. And that's sort of for my launch. So I have like a launch altar now of just like getting it out in the world. It's really changed. The dynamics of it's changed. It really is like a child. Like you kind of like envision it, and then you sort of nurture it in different stages. And now it just feels a little bit more like a young child about to kind of go out in the world, and it's there. But yes, like I think lighting my candle called my ancestors in. Like I would have smudge beside me too. So I'd like light my smudge, light my candle, and then they'd sort of come in. So it's almost like an invocation, I guess, that would happen whenever I sat at my computer. But it just definitely like, it is a whole process. Like the cards were more of a channel, and the book was more just like, okay, this has to make sense too, So a little bit more like earthly in my mind too, to make sure that it all flowed together and made sense, because that's important to me.
You got to make sense,
Yeah.
Otherwise, how are we going to read it?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Cool. What's your deck about? Is it also about animal medicine?
It has some animals in it. Right now the working title is Sacred Medicine Oracle. I'm not sure if it's going to change from that, but it's all Indigenous teachings. And then beyond, like a lot of it, I work with a ton of healers. So, mentorship and like helping them with visibility and trusting and believing in themselves. So I'd say like some of the messages are a little bit more supportive for those who are putting their medicine out in the world. Which is sort of the work that I do. But there are a lot of them through Indigenous teachings, and the artist I have is just like glorious. She's amazing.
That's exciting. Can't wait for that. In your book, I want to hear more about ancestral connection too, because you're speaking from Indigenous wisdom and from your lineages. But in the beginning of our conversation, you also kind of mentioned how this can help spark people's own remembrance and knowings. Do you want to get a little bit more into what is that ancestral connection you're speaking to in the book? And what are some of your hopes for that?
Oh, I love that question. I think I have a lot of hopes. And I think the whole concept of this book started from that appropriation conversation, right? That's like really figuring out why people do appropriate and why they appropriate Indigenous culture. And I could just see it's because there's so much. I think I could see that there was just so much opportunity for connection. It was like a portal for connection, and we are craving connection to ourselves and our inner worlds and all of that. And I think that's what I saw. So I realized that people were really disconnected from their ancestors and their own lineage. Even people who you'd think would have connection to their lineage, there's so much trauma that disconnects us, right? Whether it's like moving across like the world, or just like adoption, or family fights. Like there's just so many ways that we can get disconnected from our lineage and then our stories. And if we're disconnected from our stories, we just are disconnected from that medicine. So I wanted to bring some healing to how do we repair that? And what's a way that everybody could access? And in my opinion, that journeying is a way, or like just even practicing some embodiment and just listening. Like I think those things that colonial trauma has tried to cut us from, those are ways we can connect to our ancestors because they live in our DNA. Like the answers are there. And I know like in my own experience, and it's really working with like thousands of people, because I will do a journey and then ask a question, and then people will tell me the most amazing stories of what comes up from their bones. And so I have like evidence that people have this within their being, and I see it. And then they have understanding of their ancestral connection from a journey. So I know that it works. And then there's something about cracking that open that all of a sudden it like cracks open more of that vital force, and they feel more lit up, and they feel like they can go in the world and do their thing a little bit more because they have more support behind them. They can access their own DNA knowing. And it's like, it's kind of magical, really. So it's almost just like cracking open that connection, I think. Even if you don't have any clue who your ancestors are, there's something inside of you. There's some sort of pulse that you can hear. Everybody can hear.
It's beautiful. I mean, that's like, we all have billions of ancestors, That's amazing. Yeah. What are some of the common, I mean, you've spoken to some, we all have, not we all, but you commonly see this connection broken because of trauma and other things. And what are some more of those kind of objections or resistances to connecting with ancestors that you see? And what might you say to someone to help them reframe that?
I think not the funniest one, I shouldn't say that, but like when people say like, I really didn't like my grandfather, or I hated my mother's side of the family, or like those kind of things, right? And the first thing that I feel and experience, because I do see people who have passed on, is like when they're sort of they move through their trauma, they have a layer of that, moving through the trauma. And then once they've kind of lifted that, it's like they're simply spirit. So I try to remind people like you can connect to the divinity of their spirit, and they don't hold that earthly, I don't know, whatever, the stuff you hated, it's not there anymore. You can ask if it's still there, right? If you don't want to connect to them. So I understand that reason for disconnection. And also like, because I do really like to ask people to call on like like a healthy and well ancestor. So one that can bring forward some healing wisdom for you. Because if we're constantly calling out all our wounded ancestors, we're going to be like calling that through our experience and through our system. So I think that's important too. The healing work we do is like bringing healing work behind us and forward, right? So it's impacting our ancestors. So anything you're doing is going to help build that connection of health and wellness for your ancestors. Other people tell me, I think that it's more grief. Like they're just like, my mom never speaks about her family and I just don't even know. I ask and they just say, oh, that's not important. Or there's no story passing down, my parents didn't do that. So it's almost like there's a grief there that needs to be felt of like why that is. And, you don't have to heal that from your parents, but like find yourself in that and see if you can like move beyond what their trauma is and see if you can connect with yourself. Other than that, most of the people I work with are really open to just wanting to do that work and connect to their own ancestors. And of course, there's always like, they will come into my work a lot because they're wanting to kind of grab at another culture. And then we explain why that is, because of course it's beautiful, but we explain what would be a better way instead of grabbing and taking, coming home to yourself and then seeing what your medicine is. And then of course using, you can like talk about animal spirits or all these connections, but you don't have to take it. It's just that's a very colonial way of understanding, taking and owning.
Right. And, as you're speaking, I'm imagining, and I've heard some people talk about this too, of like, I'm from what's now Ireland, England, Scandinavia. That's pretty much, the bulk of my ancestry. And like my ancestors who were indigenous to those lands most certainly had deep relationships with the animals there. And like, what did that look like? Can I dig into some history, but also do journeying and like find that and not be like, have to, take your heritage on and claim that. And, like there's digging into these roots.
And I know sometimes it feels like work, but it's so worth it because otherwise you're going to do harm. And like, I know so many people don't want to do harm when I speak about these things. I know that's not people's intentions at all, but there are so many real life issues that need to be looked at when you're taking from another culture and you're profiting off of it. That's probably the worst part, is if you're profiting off of it and you're not giving back to the people that it's coming from. It's very harmful.
Yeah. Do you want to speak any more to that? And just like, I feel like so many people are becoming woke to that of like, whoa, this is not okay. But there's still gray areas. And I don't know if you see any like common places that people get hung up on that. And they're like, is this okay? And actually, I see one that I think happens all the time. If someone gets trained by an Indigenous elder in a lineage, that the Indigenous elder is like, I want this lineage to live, and whoever wants to train this will train in it. And then this person is maybe white, and then they go to share this with others, and they're like, well, you're not from that lineage. And so like, how I don't know, what do you have to say about these kind of like, these dynamics, these ways? And I think you've already mentioned like profiting off of it without giving back to those lineages, but it's a sticky big thing that people really get lost in. So I'd like to hear more on that.
It can be really challenging, I think. And I wish there was I wish it was black and white, and it's like, this is the right way, this is the wrong way. Because I think that every person will have like a different understanding of that. I think when you're trained by an elder and they've accepted you into that lineage, you're walking a really brave path, because you're going to have to walk that in the world and sort of stick up for yourself and say, well, actually, this is my lineage, right? Which can be a really challenging path. And I'm not discounting it, because I think that if that is what you're being called to and that elders has given you permission, then I think that that's a beautiful way to walk in the world. But it's really brave, because you're going to get a lot of questions about that. So I think those folks who are choosing that path are ready to answer the questions, and they're ready to have the fire of that. This is my path. This is what's been laid out for me. I think some of the hard parts for me seeing, like, I see lots of stuff all the time, but For instance, I just saw an oracle deck that was from the same publisher that from Hay House. It's a white woman who's done this deck, and the deck has like an Indigenous face on the front. It's a very dark-skinned face. She's holding it up, and it's obviously like a Mexican or Latinx heritage, Aztec or something like that, Peruvian perhaps. And I see that, and I think, okay, so that's probably going to be a best-selling deck because that person has a huge platform because of her privilege. And then she's going to profit off of this. And it's challenging because she's profiting off those medicines of those people that I know, some amazing Latina authors that will never get that sort of platform, right? They'll never get a card deck deal like that. And then basically that is like, you're taking from that heritage, you're using it, you're platforming it, and then you're going to be a bestseller and make all this money off of it when somebody else won't get that same opportunity. So I see it more in regards to opportunities sort of on Instagram, on social media, who gets the platform, who doesn't, who rises, who doesn't, like all of these things, which really impact. As I'm doing this book, I can see, who gets like 8 international deals, who doesn't. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with your potency of medicine or any of those things, which I find challenging sometimes in this world. So it's such a heated conversation in so many ways. But I think the only thing that I can come back to is this is between you and creator. You know how you're using these medicines. Credit your teachers. Credit your teachers. I think that's really important. Also know that you have a lot of wisdom within. So if you're taking some of that medicine a little bit, like, make sure you're also amplifying your own gifts. And how can you present that to the world in your way that doesn't feel like you're just like a mini of that person? You're not just like becoming a junior medicine, whatever person. I think that's really important too. Like, I'm always clear in my mentorship circles. Like, I do not want you to be mini Ashas in any way. I want you to be your own medicine self, combined with like anything that my teachings help you with. So those are my thoughts on that for now. But I think that those, to be mindful as we're looking out in that social media world and see like who does have the bigger platforms, who gets the book deals, who gets the accomplishments, who get the numbers. Like, it's really important to start looking through those lenses because we need to dismantle them.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I see it, and thanks for sharing that example. I love that you said that, the platforms that you get, the reach that you get, the book deals that you get is not indicative of or equal to your potency of medicine. And I think that's something that a lot of people feel, Indigenous or otherwise, probably feel like, oh my gosh, my medicine has so much to offer. Why isn't it getting out there? And,
right.
That's part of that systemic, some of the systemic oppression and biases and supremacy. Yeah. And it's important for people to know that. Like, I think we can get so wrapped up in like, if I'm not getting the big flashy thing, then am I even like doing, like, is my medicine even worthy or functional?
Right. I know. Does it even matter? Like, and that's why I just think your medicine matters. It matters. And that's a message I want to always have out there. Even in You Are the Medicine, like, that is all part of my You Are the Medicine message. You have this medicine that's meant to be shared. It's meant to be developed. You're meant to master it, I think, because like mastery is an important part of my medicine work in the world. And I think that if we were all dedicated a little bit more to our medicine, it would be really profound for the world.
I love that. So when is your book coming out, and can we pre-order it? Where can we go? And what else do you offer? Tell us, how can we go to Planet Asha?
So it's coming out March 15th is the pub date. You can order where all books are sold, wherever books are sold. Pre-orders are so vital to me because they are the things that, the first week of sales and all the pre-orders are included in that first week. And that's what can potentially make you a bestseller. So if you are drawn to any of that we've spoke about, I'd so appreciate the pre-orders. You can follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm most current usually, is asha.frost, or you can go to my website at ashafrost.com.
Cool. And does it matter? Like, is there a platform, I'm imagining, even though we're all like Amazon, does it actually help if you order through Amazon to get those pre-orders? Or does it really matter? Can you pre-order through any platform? Do you know?
You can order through any platform. What actually is really important too is reviews. So if on March 15th you get the book and you read it and you review it, like on Goodreads and Amazon, I'm in Canada, so it's like Chapters Indigo, but it's available at Target in the States, Barnes and Noble in the States. So I think just like getting reviews on there helps the algorithm. So right now, because it's like everything's online, the algorithms matter. So reviews matter so much. And of course, nice reviews always help. I'm already committed not to reading reviews, but I would love a nice review.
You can have someone screen them and just screenshot the good ones for you to feel, lifted.
Yes.
That's great. I'm going to go order it right after we're done recording. I'm so excited and it looks beautiful. Let me see that cover again, especially for our YouTube people watching on YouTube. Beautiful. Wow. So I'm going to describe it to people. There's an Indigenous woman standing in front of the moon with all the phases of the moon arcing around her. And she's wearing a cloak. And on the cloak, there is a rising or setting sun and clouds and the eagle, the bison or buffalo, the deer, and the bear. And it's really beautiful. I can't wait. That's so much congratulations on this book. I know it's not an easy process, and I'm so glad that we can share it with the world. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again. It's such a gift to be in relationship with you.
Thank you.
All the roads are windy.
Listen to over 200 free Earthspeak podcast episodes on your favorite podcast app and visit earthspeak.love to learn about our collective community and workshops.